Sometimes, the moment that changes your life forever doesn't ask for permission, it just burns its way in without warning. The night air is thick with the smell of rain-soaked asphalt, the kind that clings to your clothes and settles into your lungs, heavy and cold, as Chloe Bennet steps out of the diner, wiping her hands on a worn apron that has seen too many double shifts and not enough tips. Neon lights flicker behind her, buzzing softly, painting the sidewalk in shades of red and blue that never quite reach the darkness beyond. It's past midnight, the streets quieter than usual, just the distant hum of traffic and the occasional splash of tires cutting through puddles. Chloe pulls her thin jacket tighter around herself, her breath visible in the cool air, her mind already racing through tomorrow's problems, rent overdue, her mom's medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter, and a manager who made it clear one more late arrival would cost her the job she can't afford to lose. She starts walking toward the bus stop, counting steps like it might somehow steady the chaos in her head, when suddenly, there's a sound that doesn't belong. A sharp screech, metal against metal, followed by a hollow thud that echoes too loudly in the quiet street. Chloe freezes. Her heart skips, then races. She turns. About 50 yards down the road, a sleek black car has spun off near the curb, its front angled awkwardly, one headlight flickering like it's struggling to stay alive. For a second, everything feels suspended, like the world is holding its breath. Then a thin ribbon of smoke curls upward from the hood. Someone inside that car moves, or maybe it's just the shifting shadows, but Chloe doesn't wait to be sure. Her instincts kick in before her fear can catch up. She runs. Her sneakers slap against wet pavement, water splashing up her legs, the cold biting through her jeans as she closes the distance. The closer she gets, the stronger the smell becomes, burnt rubber, something sharp and metallic that makes her throat tighten. She slows just enough to steady her breathing, her hands trembling as she reaches the driver's side. Through the cracked window, she sees him. A man, maybe. Early 30s, slumped forward against the steering wheel, his face pale, eyes barely open like he's fighting to stay conscious. Hey, can you hear me? Chloe's voice cuts through the night, louder than she expects, edged with urgency she can't hide. No answer. Just a faint movement, a weak attempt to lift his head before it drops again. The smoke thickens, drifting past the windshield in slow, ominous waves. Chloe glances back over her shoulder. Empty street. No one coming. No sirens. No help. Just her. Her chest tightens, not just from fear, but from the weight of the decision forming in her mind. This isn't her responsibility. She could call 911, step back, wait. That's what most people would do. That's what she should do. But her eyes return to him, to the way his fingers twitch weakly against the wheel, to the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and something inside her refuses to let her walk away. Okay, stay with me, she whispers, more to herself than to him. Her hand reaches for the door handle. It's hot. Not enough to burn, but enough to make her hesitate. Just for a second. Then she grips it tighter and pulls. The door resists at first, jammed from the impact, and Chloe braces her foot against the curb, using all the strength she has left after a 12-hour shift. Come on, the metal groans, then finally gives, the door jerking open with a sharp snap. A rush of heat escapes, wrapping around her like a warning she ignores. She leans in, coughing as the air hits her lungs, her eyes watering, but she keeps moving. Up close, she can see the details now, the expensive cut of his suit, the faint glint of a cufflink at his wrist, the kind of things that don't belong to her world. But none of that matters. Not right now. Right now, he's just a man who might not make it unless someone does something. Chloe reaches for him, her fingers brushing his shoulder, then gripping firmly as she tries to pull him free. He's heavier than she expects, his body unresponsive, dead weight fighting against her urgency. I've got you, just don't give up on me, okay? Her voice shakes, but her grip tightens. She shifts her stance, ignoring the sting. building in her hands, the heat pressing closer, the fear clawing at the edges of her mind. All she knows is this: she cannot leave him here. Not like this. Not alone. Not when she's already here. And in that moment, standing in the middle of a dark, empty street with smoke curling around her and her future hanging by a thread, Chloe Bennet makes a choice that will cost her more than she knows, and give her everything she never thought she'd have. The heat pushes harder now, pressing against Chloe's face and arms like an invisible force that refuses to back down, but she leans in anyway, tightening her grip around the man's shoulders as she braces her feet against the wet pavement, her muscles trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline colliding all at once, and for a split second she wonders if she has miscalculated everything because he does not move, he does not respond, he just hangs there between consciousness and silence, and the weight of him feels impossible for someone who has barely eaten a proper meal all day, but then his hand twitches again, barely noticeable, and that tiny movement is enough to anchor her, to remind her that he is still here, still fighting, and that means she cannot stop now. Come on, please, she says, her voice breaking as she shifts her hold, pulling harder this time, inch by inch, dragging him away from the steering wheel as the fabric of his jacket catches against something jagged. Slowing her down, and she quickly reaches forward, freeing it with shaking hands before pulling again, her breath coming fast and uneven, her heart pounding so loud it drowns out everything else, until finally his upper body clears the frame of the door and she stumbles backward, nearly losing her balance as his full weight collapses against her, forcing her to drop to one knee on the cold, soaked ground, water seeping through her jeans instantly, but she does not let go, she refuses to let go. Instead she adjusts her grip, wrapping her arms under his shoulders and dragging him farther, away from the car, away from the growing heat, every inch feeling like a mile, her arms screaming in protest as she pulls him another few feet, then another, until the distance feels just enough, until the air around them no longer burns her lungs with every breath, and only then does she let herself stop, collapsing beside him, gasping for air as her hands shake uncontrollably, the sting in her palms now sharp and undeniable, her skin raw from contact with the heated metal, but she barely notices because her eyes are locked on his face, watching, waiting, searching for any sign that she did not come too late. Hey, stay with me, she says softly now. Her voice gentler, almost pleading as she brushes damp hair away from his forehead, her fingers unsteady but careful, and for a moment there is nothing, just silence stretching too long, too heavy, until finally his chest rises a little deeper, a faint breath that feels like a victory she did not expect to win, and Chloe exhales a shaky laugh, half relief, half disbelief. That is it, just breathe, okay, you are doing great, she murmurs, even though she has no idea if he can hear her, even though she has never been trained for this, never imagined herself in a moment like this, and yet here she is, holding a stranger's life together with nothing but determination and hope, and then in the distance, faint at first but growing louder, she hears it, the sound of sirens cutting through the night, sharp and urgent, and her shoulders sag with a relief so sudden it almost makes her dizzy. Help is coming, real help, people who know what they are doing, people who can take over, and for the first time since this started, Chloe allows herself to breathe fully, to let the tension loosen its grip just enough for her to think again, to feel again, and she glances down at him, noticing the details she had ignored before, the expensive watch at his wrist, the tailored fabric of his clothes, the subtle scent of something refined beneath the smoke and rain, details that suggest a life completely different from hers, a world she has never stepped into, and yet none of that changes what just happened. None of that matters in this moment, because out here, on this empty street, he is just a man who needed help and she is just someone who refused to walk away, and as the flashing red and blue lights finally appear at the far end of the road, reflecting off the wet pavement like a promise, Chloe feels something unexpected settle deep in her chest, not pride, not even relief, but a quiet certainty that this moment, this choice, will follow her long after the night is over, long after the sirens fade, long after she returns to the life waiting for her, and as the emergency crew rushes toward them, voices calling out, hands moving quickly and efficiently, she slowly pulls back, letting them take over, her fingers lingering for just a second longer before she releases him completely, watching as they lift him onto a stretcher, securing him with practiced precision, and one of them turns to her, asking questions she struggles to answer because her mind feels distant now, like everything is happening a few seconds behind reality, but she manages to nod, to respond, to assure them that she is fine even though her hands tell a different story, and when they ask for her name, for her information, she hesitates just long enough for doubt to slip in, just long enough to remember the diner, her shift, the consequences waiting for her if she does not show up, and so she gives them only what feels necessary, keeping the rest to herself, stepping back as they load him into the ambulance, the doors closing with a final, decisive sound, and as the vehicle pulls away, sirens rising again into the night, Chloe stands there alone on the sidewalk, soaked, exhausted, her hands stinging and her future uncertain, watching the red lights disappear into the distance, unaware that the man she just saved will wake up remembering only fragments of fire and pain and one clear image that refuses to fade, the girl who chose to stay when everyone else would have walked away. By the time Chloe finally turns away from the empty street, the silence feels louder than the sirens that just disappeared, and the cold settles deeper into her bones now that the adrenaline is fading, leaving behind a heavy exhaustion that pulls at every step as she walks back toward the diner, her shoes soaked, her hands throbbing with every movement, but she keeps going because stopping would mean thinking, and thinking would mean realizing just how much this night might have already cost her, and when the flickering neon sign comes back into view, buzzing faintly like it always does, it feels almost unreal, like she stepped out of one world and into another without warning, and as she pushes the door open, the warmth inside hits her all at once, carrying the familiar smell of coffee and grease and something fried too long, grounding her in a reality she understands, but the moment her manager looks up and sees her, that fragile sense of normal disappears instantly. "Chloe, where have you been?" His voice cuts through the room, sharp and impatient, and every head turns toward her, taking in her appearance, the damp clothes, the dirt on her knees, the faint redness on her hands that she quickly tries to hide, but there is no time to explain, no space for context, just the ticking clock of responsibility that she already knows she has failed to meet. There was an accident. She starts, her voice quieter now, stripped of the urgency it carried just minutes ago, but he shakes his head before she can finish, dismissing the words like they do not matter. "You were supposed to be back 20 minutes ago, I had to cover your tables, customers walked out." His tone is not angry in the way she expected, it is worse, it is tired, final, like he has already made a decision before she even walked through the door, and Chloe feels her chest tighten, not because she does not understand, but because she does, because she knew this was coming the moment she chose to stay out there on that street. "I am sorry, someone needed help," she says, and even as the words leave her mouth, she hears how small they sound in a place where help does not pay bills and kindness does not keep the lights on, and her manager exhales slowly, rubbing his temple like this conversation is something he does not have the energy for. "I know you are a good person, Chloe, but I need reliable people. I cannot keep doing this," and there it is, the line she cannot cross, the one she has been balancing on for weeks now, finally giving way beneath her feet, and for a second she considers arguing, explaining everything, telling them about the car, the smoke, the man who might not have made it if she had walked away, but she sees it in their faces, the doubt, the distance, the simple fact that none of that changes what they need from her, and so instead she nods slowly, swallowing the words that would not change anything anyway. "I understand," she says, even though it feels like something inside her is quietly breaking, and within minutes she is in the back room, pulling her apron off, folding it carefully like it still belongs to her, like she might need it tomorrow, even though she knows she will not, her fingers lingering on the fabric for just a second longer before she sets it down and reaches for her jacket, the same thin layer that did nothing to keep her warm outside, and when she steps back out into the night, the diner door closing behind her with a soft click, it feels heavier this time, like it is not just a door but a line being drawn between what was and what comes next, and the street looks the same as it always does, quiet, indifferent, cars passing by without slowing, people moving forward with their lives, unaware that hers has just shifted in a way she cannot yet measure, and she starts walking again, slower now, her body aching with every step, her hands still stinging as she tucks them into her pockets, and that is when she feels it, something small, solid, pressed against the lining of her jacket that she does not remember putting There, and she pauses under a dim streetlight, curiosity cutting through her exhaustion as she reaches in and pulls it out, and for a moment she just stares, turning it over in her fingers, a single cufflink, dark metal slightly marked, engraved with the initials AK, the surface dulled by heat but still unmistakably valuable, still belonging to a world far removed from hers, and Chloe frowned slightly, trying to remember when it could have slipped into her pocket, and then it clicks, the car. The man, the way she had reached for him without thinking, the way everything else had blurred into instinct and urgency, and she exhales slowly, the weight of it settling in her palm, not just as an object, but as proof that tonight was real, that it actually happened, and for a second she considers what it might be worth, how much it could help with rent, with groceries, with the endless list of things she cannot keep up with, but something about it makes her hesitate, something about the memory attached to it, the way his life had hung in the balance while she held on, refusing to let go, and instead of slipping it back into her pocket to forget about it, she closes her fingers around it more carefully, like it matters, like it means something she does not fully understand yet, and as she continues walking down the dimly lit street, the city stretching endlessly ahead of her, Chloe Bennett does not realize that somewhere across town, in a private hospital room filled with quiet machines and concerned voices, the man she saved is beginning to wake, and with him, the first fragile thread that will pull their worlds together is already being set in motion. The room is quiet in a way that feels expensive, the kind of silence that absorbs every small sound and turns it into something noticeable, the steady rhythm of a heart monitor, the soft hum of air conditioning, the faint rustle of fabric as someone shifts in a chair, and in the center of it all, Alexander Knight lies still against crisp white sheets, the sharp lines of his features softened by exhaustion, his breathing steady but shallow, like his body is still deciding whether to fully return or stay suspended somewhere in between, and for a long moment nothing changes, until finally his fingers twitch, barely at first, then again, stronger this time, and his brow tightens slightly as if he is trying to push through something unseen, and then his eyes open, not all at once, but slowly, unfocused at first, blinking against the bright overhead light as confusion settles in before awareness can catch up. And the first thing he feels is the weight in his chest, not pain exactly, but pressure, like something heavy has been pressing down on him for too long, and he inhales deeper, testing the air, grounding himself in the present as voices immediately rise around him, controlled but urgent, doctors and nurses stepping closer, calling his name, asking questions, checking monitors, but their words blur together, distant and secondary to the fragments flashing behind his eyes, pieces of memory that refuse to align properly, rain hitting glass, the sharp turn of the wheel, the sudden stillness that followed, and then something else, something stronger than the rest, a face, not clear enough to fully define but impossible to ignore, eyes focused, determined, a voice cutting through everything, telling him to stay with her, and his hand shifts slightly as if reaching for something that is no longer there. There was someone, he says, his voice rough, unfamiliar even to himself, and the room stills just enough for the closest doctor to lean in. You were in an accident, Mr. Knight, you are safe now, the doctor replies calmly, but Alex shakes his head slightly, the motion slow, deliberate, because that is not what he is asking, not what matters right now. No, someone pulled me out, he insists, his words clearer this time despite the strain, and the staff exchange quick glances, uncertainty flickering between them because they know the reports, they know the scene, the timeline, the unanswered questions, and one of them nods cautiously. Emergency responders found you outside the vehicle. We are still gathering details, but that is not enough, not even close, because Alex can feel it, the certainty settling deep in his chest stronger than any confusion around him. Someone was there before the sirens, before the lights, someone who made a choice he cannot fully remember but knows without question, and his gaze shifts upward, focusing more now, sharper, the fog lifting just enough for intention to take its place. Find her, he says, the words quiet but carrying a weight that does not need volume to be understood, and the room pauses again, not because they do not hear him, but because they do, and they recognize the tone, the authority beneath the exhaustion. The man who built an empire from nothing does not ask without meaning it, and the doctor hesitates for only a second before nodding. We will look into it, but Alex's eyes do not leave his, searching for confirmation, for commitment. Not look, find her, he repeats, and this time there is no mistaking it, no room for interpretation, and somewhere beyond the glass walls of the private suite, the shift begins, quiet but immediate, calls being made, information being requested, security teams alerted, because when someone like Alexander Knight makes a request, it does not stay a suggestion for long. And as the room slowly returns to motion, the staff continuing their checks, adjusting equipment. Noting his responses, Alex lets his head rest back against the pillow, his body still weak, still recovering, but his mind holding on to that single thread that refuses to break, the image of a girl in the rain, her hands reaching for him without hesitation, her voice cutting through the chaos with something steady and real, something he cannot explain but cannot ignore either, and across the city, far from the polished floors and controlled air of the hospital, Chloe sits on the edge of a narrow bed in a small, dim apartment, the single lamp casting a soft yellow glow that barely fills the room, her jacket draped over a chair, her hands resting in her lap as she carefully turns the cufflink over and over between her fingers, the engraved initials catching the light just enough to remind her that it belongs to someone important, someone with a life far removed from hers, and she exhales slowly, leaning back against the wall as the weight of the day finally settles in, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, the quiet fear of what tomorrow will bring now that she has no job to return to, no safety net to fall back on, and yet despite all of that, despite everything she lost in a single night, there is something else there too, something she cannot quite name, a sense that this moment is not finished yet, that the story did not end when the ambulance drove away, and as she closes her hand around the cufflink once more, holding it a little tighter this time, neither of them realize just how close their paths are to crossing again, or how much that single decision made in the middle of a quiet, rain-soaked street is about to change everything they thought they understood about their lives. By morning, the city moves on as if nothing ever happened, cars filling the streets, people rushing past each other with coffee cups in hand and places to be, and inside a glass tower that rises above it all, quiet urgency replaces the calm precision that usually defines Alexander Knight's world, because now every second matters, every detail counts, and in a conference room lined with screens and polished steel, a small team gathers around footage pulled from traffic cameras, security feeds, and anything else that might have captured even a fragment of the night before, and Alex sits at the head of the table, still pale, still recovering, but fully present, his focus sharper than anyone expected this soon, his gaze locked on the screens as the footage plays again and again, the moment of impact blurred by rain, the angle imperfect, the lighting inconsistent, but they keep watching, rewinding, slowing it down, searching for something more than shadows and motion, something that will give shape to the person who stepped into that moment without hesitation, and then finally, there it is, barely visible at first, a figure running into frame, small compared to the car, moving faster than anyone else nearby, not away from danger but toward it, and the room quiets as the clip loops again, and Alex leans forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. That is her, he says, not because the image is clear, but because something about the movement, the urgency, the refusal to stop feels unmistakable, and the head of security nods, already pulling up enhanced stills, isolating frames, adjusting contrast, doing everything possible to bring clarity to a moment that was never meant to be captured in detail. We can track her direction after the incident, see where she went, he says, and Alex does not hesitate, do it, because for him this is no longer a question of curiosity. It is something deeper, something personal, and as instructions are given and calls are made, the machine that built his empire shifts seamlessly into motion, resources aligning, people moving, all focused on a single objective that would seem insignificant to anyone else but carries weight only he fully understands, and across town, far from glass towers and coordinated efforts, Chloe wakes to the sound of her alarm, a habit she cannot seem to break even though she has nowhere to be, the small digital clock blinking beside her bed, the time staring back at her like a reminder of everything that has already changed, and she lies there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality settle again, no shift to rush to, no paycheck waiting at the end of the week, just the quiet uncertainty of what comes next, and she exhales slowly before sitting up, her body still sore, her hands still tender as she flexes her fingers carefully, the faint redness now more visible in the daylight, and her eyes drift to the nightstand where the cufflink rests, placed there deliberately before she fell asleep, and she reaches for it again, turning it over in her palm like she did the night before, tracing the engraved initials with her thumb, a K, the letters feeling heavier now, more significant, like they carry a story she has only touched the edge of, and for a moment she considers searching for it, looking it up, figuring out exactly who it belongs to, but she hesitates, unsure if knowing would change anything or just make the distance between their worlds feel even greater, and instead she sets it back down, pushing the thought aside as she stands and begins to get ready. Because regardless of what happened last night, life does not pause, bills still need to be paid. Food still needs to be bought, and she still needs to find a way forward, and hours later, as the search on one side of the city narrows and sharpens, piecing together a path from the accident site to nearby streets, identifying possible routes, matching time stamps, building a map of movement that leads away from the scene, Chloe steps into a small convenience store, scanning the shelves with quiet calculation, adding up prices in her head before she even reaches for anything, choosing only what she knows she can afford, and when she steps up to the counter, placing a few basic items down, the cashier rings them up without looking twice, the total appearing on the screen, and Chloe reaches into her pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills and coins, counting carefully, making sure it is enough, and as she does, the cufflink shifts slightly in her jacket, pressing against the fabric like a reminder she cannot ignore, and for a brief moment, the thought crosses her mind again, how easily it could solve at least one of her problems, how quickly it could turn into something practical, something useful, but just as quickly, she closes her hand around her money instead, choosing not to take that path. Not yet, and somewhere not far away, a black car slows near the street where she lives, the engine quiet, the presence almost unnoticeable among the flow of traffic, but inside, someone is watching, comparing, confirming, connecting the final pieces of a search that started with a single unanswered question, and as Chloe steps out of the store, unaware of the eyes that have just found her, the distance between their two worlds closes for the first time, not by chance, but by intention, and the moment that began in fire and rain moves one step closer to its next chapter. Chloe steps onto the sidewalk, the small paper bag in her hand rustling softly with each movement, the afternoon sun breaking through scattered clouds and casting a pale light across the street that feels almost too calm compared to everything shifting beneath the surface, and she adjusts her jacket slightly, unaware that just across the road, behind tinted glass, a pair of eyes follows her every step with quiet precision, confirming what hours of searching had only suggested, because now there is no doubt, the girl from the footage, the one who ran toward the car when everyone else stepped back, the one who disappeared before anyone could ask her name, is no longer just a blurred figure on a screen, she is real, standing only yards away, and inside the car, the man in the passenger seat lowers the tablet displaying the still image, comparing it one last time to the girl walking away, and nods once, subtle but decisive, before turning slightly toward the back seat. It is her, he says, and in the quiet that follows, Alexander Knight shifts his gaze forward, watching through the glass as Chloe pauses at the corner, waiting for the light to change, her posture relaxed but tired, like someone carrying more weight than they should, and for a moment, he does not move, not because he is unsure, but because the reality of the moment settles differently than he expected. This is not a memory, not a fragment, this is the person who stood between him and something final, and she looks nothing like the world he knows. No polished edges, no rehearsed confidence, just quiet resilience that does not ask to be seen, and something about that makes him hesitate, just for a second, before he reaches for the door handle and steps out onto the street, the sound of the car door closing drawing Chloe's attention almost immediately, her eyes shifting toward him with a brief flicker of curiosity that quickly fades into indifference, because to her, he is just another well-dressed man stepping out of an expensive car, someone who belongs to a different reality entirely, and she turns slightly ready to continue walking, but his voice stops her before she can take another step. Wait, he says, not loud, but clear enough to carry across the small distance between them, and Chloe pauses, more out of instinct than intention, glancing back over her shoulder, her expression guarded now, cautious in a way that comes from experience rather than fear. Do I know you? She asks, her tone neutral, not unfriendly, but not inviting either, and Alex steps closer, careful to keep his movements measured, controlled, as if approaching too quickly might break something fragile in the space between them. You might not, he says, his voice steady, though there is something beneath it that he does not bother to hide. But I know you, and that earns him a slight frown, confusion replacing the indifference in her eyes as she studies him more closely, taking in the tailored suit, the composed posture, the subtle authority that seems to follow him without effort, and for a moment she considers walking away, because nothing about this feels normal, nothing about this fits into the day she was expecting to have. But then he takes another step forward, just enough to close the distance, and his next words shift everything. "You were there that night," he says, and the air between them changes instantly, the casual rhythm of the street fading into the background as Chloe's expression tightens, recognition flickering across her face before she can hide it, and her fingers instinctively curl slightly, as if protecting something unseen. "I do not know what you are talking about," she replies, too quickly, the denial automatic, practiced, because admitting it would mean opening a door she is not ready to step through. But Alex does not argue, does not push in the way she expects. Instead he reaches into his pocket and slowly brings out something small, something familiar, holding it up just enough for her to see, and her breath catches before she can stop it, because even from a distance, she recognizes it immediately, the matching piece to what she has been carrying since that night, the same design, the same engraving. And for a second, the world narrows to that single object, to the undeniable connection it represents. "You pulled me out of that car," he says quietly, not as a question, but as a statement, and Chloe's defenses falter just enough for the truth to slip through, her gaze dropping to the cufflink in his hand before returning to his face, searching for something she cannot quite define. "You should not be out here," she says instead, deflecting, because focusing on him feels safer than acknowledging what happened. "You need to be resting," and there is a hint of something in her voice now, something softer, almost concerned despite everything, and Alex notices it immediately, the way her instinct to care surfaces even when she tries to keep her distance, and it confirms what he already suspected, what he already knows. "I am fine," he replies, though his voice carries the weight of everything he has been through, "because of you," and the words land heavier than either of them expect, hanging between them in a silence that stretches just long enough to feel significant, and Chloe shifts her weight slightly, uncomfortable under the attention, under the implication of what he is saying, because she did not do it for this, did not stay for recognition or gratitude. She did it because leaving was never an option in that moment, and now, standing here with him, with the truth fully realized between them, she feels that same instinct rising again, to step back, to disappear before this becomes something more than she can handle. "You are welcome," she says simply, her voice steady again as she takes a small step backward, already preparing to leave. But Alex does not move to stop her this time, not physically. Instead he speaks again, his tone quieter, more deliberate. "I have been looking for you," and that makes her pause, just for a fraction of a second, enough for him to continue, "not to thank you and walk away, but because what you did matters." And Chloe looks at him then, really looks at him, seeing not just the man in front of her but the weight behind his words, the sincerity that does not feel practiced or performative. And for the first time since this conversation began, she does not immediately turn away. Because something about this moment feels unfinished, like the choice she made that night is still echoing forward, pulling them both into a direction neither of them planned, and neither of them can fully stop. Chloe holds his gaze for a moment longer than she intended, then exhales slowly as if releasing something she has been holding since that night, her grip tightening slightly around the paper bag in her hand before she shifts it to her other side, creating a small barrier between them that feels necessary even if she cannot fully explain why. "It mattered in that moment," she says finally, her voice calm but firm. "That is enough." And she starts to turn again, her body already leaning toward escape, toward the familiar rhythm of walking away before things become complicated. But Alex steps forward just enough to keep her from disappearing into the flow of the street, not blocking her path, just anchoring the moment in place. "It is not enough for me," he replies, and there is no arrogance in his tone, no expectation that she should agree, just a simple truth that feels heavier than it should. And Chloe pauses again, her shoulders rising slightly as she takes in a quiet breath. Her patience thinning now, not because he is wrong, but because she cannot afford to stay here and unpack something this big with someone like him, someone who belongs to a world that does not have to count every dollar or worry about what comes next. "Look," she says, turning back to face him fully this time, her expression more guarded now, more deliberate. I did not save you so you could find me later and make it into something bigger than it was. You were in trouble, I helped, that is it. And she nods once as if closing the subject herself, but Alex does not interrupt, does not argue, he just listens, really listens, and when she finishes, he lets the silence sit for a second before speaking again. Then why keep it, he asks, his eyes flicking briefly toward her jacket pocket, subtle but intentional, and Chloe's expression shifts instantly. Surprise breaking through her control as her hand instinctively moves toward the pocket where the cufflink rests, and she hesitates, caught off guard by the question, by the fact that he noticed, and for a second she does not answer because she does not have a clean explanation ready. I did not know what it was at first, she says after a moment, her voice quieter now, less defensive, and then, I just did not feel right getting rid of it, and the honesty in that answer surprises even her, because it is not logical, not practical, but it is real, and Alex nods slightly, understanding more from that than she realizes, because to him, that small choice says everything about who she is, about the way she sees the world, and he takes another step closer, not invading her space, just closing the distance enough to make his next words feel more personal, more direct. You lost your job. Because of me, he says, not as a question, but as a statement he has already confirmed, and Chloe's eyes narrow slightly, tension rising again as she processes how he could know that, how far he has already gone to find out things about her life, and she straightens a little, her posture shifting into something more defensive, more protective. That is not your concern, she replies, her tone sharper now. I made that choice, and Alex nods. Again, accepting that without argument, but not letting it end there. It still affected you, he says, and there is something in the way he says it, not pity, not guilt, just acknowledgement, that makes it harder for her to dismiss, and she looks away for a moment, glancing down the street as if considering her next move, calculating how to leave without letting this conversation pull her in any further. But before she can act, he continues, his voice steady but softer now, I am not here to hand you money and walk away, and that makes her look back at him immediately, suspicion flashing across her face because that is exactly what she expected, exactly what she has been trying to avoid. Then what are you here for, she asks, crossing her arms slightly as if bracing herself for an answer she already thinks she understands, but Alex does not rush, does not give her something rehearsed or polished. Instead he meets her gaze directly, to make sure that what you did is respected. Not reduced to a transaction, he says, and the words land differently than she expects, catching her off guard in a way that shifts the energy between them, because this is not about replacing something lost, it is about recognizing something given freely, and Chloe studies him for a long moment, searching for the catch, the angle, the part of this that fits into the pattern she has seen before, but she does not find it, and that unsettles her more than anything else. People like you do not just do things without expecting something back, she says quietly, her voice carrying more experience than accusation, and Alex does not deny it, does not pretend otherwise. Most do not, he agrees, but you did, and the simplicity of that answer removes the distance she has been trying to maintain, just enough to make her hesitate again, to make her question whether walking away right now is as easy as she thought it would be. And the city continues moving around them, cars passing, people crossing the street, the light changing from red to green and back again, but in this small space between them, everything feels suspended, balanced on the edge of a decision neither of them fully understands. Yet, and Chloe exhales slowly, her shoulders lowering just a fraction as she uncrosses her arms, not giving in, but no longer completely closed off either, because something about this moment feels different from anything she has experienced before, like the consequences of that single night are still unfolding, still reaching forward, and whether she wants it or not, she is already part of what comes next. The silence between them stretches just long enough to feel like a turning point, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like something shifting beneath the surface that neither of them can ignore anymore, and Chloe looks away first, her gaze drifting past him to the street beyond, as if grounding herself in something familiar before she makes her next move, because this is the part where things usually go wrong, where expectations appear, where kindness gets measured and repaid in ways that never feel equal, and she has spent too much of her life learning how to walk away before that happens, but something about him standing there, not pushing, not offering shortcuts or easy solutions, makes that instinct hesitate just long enough for him to speak again. There is an event tonight, Alex says, his tone calm, almost casual, but there is intention behind it that does not go unnoticed, a foundation gala. Something my company hosts every year, and Chloe's eyes narrow slightly as she looks back at him, already sensing where this is going, already preparing to shut it down before it can take shape. That does not sound like my kind of place, she replies, her voice even, but there is a hint of discomfort there, something deeper than simple disinterest, and Alex nods as if he expected that answer, because he probably did. It is not, he agrees without hesitation, but neither was that night. And you showed up anyway, and the comparison lands sharper than she expects. Catching her off guard for a second before she regains her footing, her defenses rising again. That was different, she says quickly, that was not about being seen, and Alex steps slightly to the side, giving her space rather than taking it, his posture open in a way that feels deliberate. Exactly, he says, his voice softer now, and that is why it matters, and Chloe exhales slowly, her fingers tightening briefly around the strap of her bag as she processes what he is really asking, because this is not about an event, not really, it is about stepping into a world that was never meant for her, standing in a room where people like her are either invisible or out of place, and she shakes her head slightly, already pulling back. No, she says, more firmly this time, I am not going to stand in a room full of people who will look at me like I do not belong just so you can make a point. And there it is, the truth beneath her resistance, not fear exactly, but experience, the kind that teaches you where you fit and where you do not. And Alex does not interrupt, does not dismiss it, he lets it exist for what it is before responding. They might, he says honestly, but that does not change the fact that you do belong there, not because of me, but because of what you did. And Chloe lets out a quiet breath that almost turns into a laugh, but there is no humor in it, just disbelief. That is not how it works, she says, her voice softer now, not arguing as much as explaining. People like you decide who belongs in rooms like that, not people like me. And for the first time, something shifts in Alex's expression, not frustration, but understanding. Like he recognizes the truth in her words even as he prepares to challenge it. Then let me change that, he says. Not as a command, not even as an offer, but as a statement of intent. And Chloe studies him for a long moment, searching again for the angle, the hidden expectation, the part of this that will eventually turn into something she cannot control. But all she sees is certainty, the kind that does not need to prove itself, and that unsettles her more than anything else, because it leaves her with a choice she cannot easily dismiss. Why does this matter so much to you? She asks finally, her voice quieter now, more genuine, and Alex does not look away, does not soften the answer to make it easier, because I built a world where people measure value by numbers and status, he says, his tone steady, and you stepped into it for a moment and proved that none of that matters when it actually counts, and the honesty in that lands somewhere deeper than she expects, because it is not about her anymore, not entirely, it is about something bigger, something she touched without meaning to. And Chloe looks down for a second, her thoughts moving faster than she can organize them, weighing the cost of saying yes against the comfort of walking away, and for once, neither option feels simple, because walking away would be easy, safe, predictable, but saying yes would mean stepping into something unknown, something that could shift everything she thought she understood about her place in the world. And when she finally looks back up, her expression is still cautious, still guarded, but there is something else there now too, something quieter but just as strong, curiosity. I do not have anything to wear for something like that, she says, not agreeing, not refusing, just stating a fact that feels like a boundary. And Alex allows himself the smallest hint of a smile, not because he has one, but because the door is no longer closed. That part is easy, he replies, and Chloe shakes her head slightly, already anticipating where that could lead. I am not letting you turn this into some kind of makeover story, she says quickly, and Alex nods, accepting the condition without hesitation. Then do not change anything, he says, his voice calm. Come exactly as you are. And the simplicity of that leaves her with nothing to push against, no obvious reason to refuse without confronting the real reason behind it. And for a moment, the noise of the city fades again, leaving just the two of them standing at the edge of a decision that feels bigger than it should. And Chloe inhales slowly, her shoulders rising and falling as she makes a choice that surprises even herself. Not because it is reckless, but because it is different. I will think about it, she says finally, and it is not a promise. But it is not a refusal either, and for now, that is enough, because both of them understand that something has already shifted, something that started with a single decision in the middle of a quiet street and is now leading them somewhere neither of them expected to go. By the time evening settles over the city, the skyline glows with a quiet kind of power, light stretching upward like a promise only some people know how to claim, and inside one of the tallest buildings, the gala unfolds exactly as expected, polished, precise, filled with voices that carry confidence and conversations that revolve around influence, numbers, and names that hold weight in rooms like this. And Alexander Knight stands among it all, dressed as he always is, composed, controlled. But there is something different tonight, something just beneath the surface that keeps pulling his attention away from the familiar rhythm of handshakes and introductions, because for the first time, this room feels incomplete, like it is missing something he cannot ignore, and as he glances toward the entrance for what must be the 10th time, a quiet doubt begins to form, not about her, but about whether he asked too much. Whether stepping into this world is a line she should not have to cross, and just as that thought settles, the doors open again, not dramatically, not with any announcement, just a simple shift in motion as someone steps inside, and for a moment, no one notices, because she does not arrive like the others, she does not command attention or follow the patterns expected in a place like this, she just walks in, steady, unhurried, wearing exactly what she said she would, nothing more, nothing less. And Chloe pauses just inside the room, her eyes adjusting to the brightness, the scale, the unfamiliar weight of a space that was never built for someone like her, and for a second, she considers turning back, because every instinct tells her she does not belong here, that this is a mistake, but then she remembers his words, not the ones about the event, but the ones about respect, about not reducing what she did to something small, and she straightens slightly, taking one step forward, then another. And that is when Alex sees her, and everything else fades. The conversations, the movement, the expectations, all of it falling away as his focus locks onto the one person in the room who was never supposed to be here, and without hesitation, he moves toward her, closing the distance with a certainty that does not need explanation, and as he approaches, a few nearby guests begin to notice, their conversations slowing, their attention shifting. Because when someone like Alex changes direction so deliberately, it means something, and when he reaches her, he does not greet her the way he would anyone else in this room, there is no formality, no distance, just a quiet acknowledgement that feels more real than anything else happening around them. You came, he says, his voice low but steady, and Chloe meets his gaze, her expression still cautious, still aware of every eye that has started to turn toward them, but there is something else there too. Something stronger than the discomfort. I said I would think about it, she replies, and there is a faint hint of a smile in her voice. Subtle but present, and Alex nods once. As if that is enough, as if her being here says everything that needs to be said, and then, without raising his voice, without drawing attention in the way people might expect, he turns slightly, addressing the room not through volume, but through presence, because when he speaks, people listen. Before we continue tonight, he says, and the conversation's quiet almost instantly, the room shifting its focus in a way that feels practiced, automatic. There is someone I would like you to meet. And Chloe feels it then, the weight of the moment, the shift from being unseen to being the center of attention, and every instinct tells her to step back, to disappear before this becomes too much, but she stays, not because it is easy, but because leaving now would undo something she has already chosen to face, and Alex gestures toward her, not like he is presenting something, but like he is acknowledging something that already exists. A few nights ago, I would not be standing here if it were not for her, he says, and the words move through the room in a way that changes the atmosphere instantly, curiosity replacing indifference, attention sharpening into something more focused, more real. And Chloe can feel it, the shift in how they look at her, not as someone out of place, but as someone they do not yet understand, and Alex reaches into his pocket, pulling out the cufflink she recognized earlier, holding it up just enough for it to catch the light. She did not know who I was, he continues, his voice steady. She did not know what it could mean for her, she only knew that someone needed help, and she chose to stay, and the simplicity of that lands harder than anything else he could have said, because it strips away everything this room usually values and replaces it with something they cannot measure, and then he turns back to her, his attention narrowing again, the rest of the room fading into the background as he steps closer, his voice quieter now, meant only for her. You gave me a second chance, he says, not because of who I am, but because of who you are, and Chloe feels something shift inside her. Not because of the room, not because of the attention, but because of the way he says it, like it matters beyond this moment, beyond this place, and she reaches into her pocket, pulling out the matching cufflink, holding it for a second before placing it gently in his hand, completing something that started without either of them understanding it, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, because they do not need to, the meaning already clear in the space between them. And then Alex looks at her again, not as a CEO, not as someone defined by everything he built, but simply as a man standing in front of the person who changed the course of his life. If I had nothing, he asks quietly, would you still have stayed? And Chloe meets his gaze without hesitation this time, her answer steady, certain, I already did, and in that moment, everything else fades, the room, the expectations, the distance between their worlds, leaving only the truth that started it all. That sometimes the most important things are not built, not earned, not negotiated, but chosen, freely, without knowing what comes next, and that choice, once made, has the power to change everything.